host, Sean Pennington, and this show is dedicated to the mental health and wellness of not only yourself, but of our corrections, our law enforcement, our veterans, and all of our first responders. So, last week's episode, I was talking about PTSD in corrections. This week's episode, I'm actually going to take a dive into what is defined as hitting the wall. And with hitting the wall, it is not just about the field of corrections or first responders. This could be anybody, any career, anything of that nature. The biggest thing that a lot of people don't understand is what it entails, what it is, and how you can prevent yourself from actually being there in that regard. So let's take a deep dive into it and let's look and see how we can prevent you from hitting the wall. Okay, so when we talk about hitting the wall, the very first thing people want to know is, well, what is it? Is it a physical thing? Is it mental? Is it emotional? Things of that nature. And by definition, hitting the wall is defined, at least on Google, as an expression that refers to reaching a point when someone feels unable to continue doing something due to difficulty. In the context of mental and emotional health, it can mean experiencing fatigue from a combination of internal and external pressures or stress. Now, in every job, in every part of life, you're going to have something of this nature. I mean, it's not going to be to the point of how it was described to me in visual contexts is, let's take you being in office and destroying all the computer equipment, destroying everything there just because, and storm out of the building and go through that whole ordeal. It can be emotional stress, which also is part of the factor from last week of PTSD. The underlying part of hitting the wall is, it's still, to me, it's unknown. However, I've kind of went through that experience in life, within a job, and I won't say what really had happened or how I can tell you how I felt, per se, and the context out of it, and being in a job where you've been there for the better part of, let's say, 15 years. We'll use this as an example. You're there, you're working your way up through your company, and you see things not being done the way you think that it could be ran, could be done. You've tried to show that, hey, you can lead by example, but there's a point at which people don't take your advice and they run with the choice of themselves, and you have no control. And eventually, no matter what you do, no matter what you say, eventually you get upset, and in the middle of a shift or whatever you're doing, you just up and walk out. No calls to anyone, not a care of what happens to the place. That is emotionally hitting the wall. That is a stressor in hitting the wall. And a lot of people, in my opinion, with hitting the wall, have experienced PTSD through that, but haven't went through the avenues to be able to get help. And I talked about it on last week's podcast. There is plenty of places for our corrections to get help. However, when you look at it from the normal public, it's where do you get help? Where can you find help? And there's many avenues. You can search many places online that can give you the help you need. Even if it's you don't want to talk to someone, let's say face to face, you can actually go now and do it through text messages with mental health therapists who are more than willing to sit and help you. So when you look at the grand scheme of everything, but this episode being hitting the wall, I don't believe that I was to that point per se. I mean, I was to an extent, but I won't say I wasn't. I believe I was at the time. And when you really sit and go through it, I was to the point in my life professionally that I was done. I really didn't see any opportunities. I was very frustrated. And a lot of that also had to do with work. And not being able to go through my life and actually have a personal life. And that happens in corrections. It happens as doctors, it happens first responders, it happens with all walks of life. Especially if in life you don't have time for the little things, to enjoy the little things. And since we're on the discussion of it and hitting the wall and everything, take a little time away from your professional life. And yes, I understand days off, I understand vacations, and vacations is a big one because everybody likes a vacation. They get that 5 day, sometimes 10 day if you're really able to. Or some companies, you have the ability to take a full 3 weeks off and use them at your discretion. And some companies, they have personal time off and you're able to go in that route. So you have avenues working. But here's the kicker on it, is that when you look at it, on your actual days off, what are you actually doing? It could be, rejuvenating. Some people have 2 days off in a row. Some people only have 1 day on, 1 day off, or they're working a day and they're off a day. So whenever they're off, that first day, they don't want to do anything. They really just want to just be lazy, basically. And we've all done it. Everybody's done it. You just don't want to do anything. And if you have a family and you work 60 hours in a week and it's that day off and your kids are around and you actually, I don't want to say you have to put oomph in it, but you actually have to, I hate saying make it a chore, but it is, to be with your kids, to be with your wife, your husband, or your partner, or, whatever the case may be. The biggest thing, though, is that on those days off, take the time to do little things. Re-energize yourself. And I have found, especially within the last couple of months, that I've been working on myself mentally, sometimes physically and emotionally, spiritually, all this. It's all grouped into one setting. That when you take a little bit of time out with your significant other, it could be as much as just sitting by a lake. You're not doing anything. You don't have to be fishing. You just sit there, watch nature. Go to a mountainside, go sit on the hill. And you can just sit in the backyard with them. Make a little bonfire if you're able to in your area. It could be sharing events. Like me, I'm able to have the ability now to share bowling with my girlfriend. We're both not very good. Of course, she says I'm actually better, and I've been getting better. I've been doing it for 8 years, but I am so mentally, I worry about every little thing. I hate saying I'm a perfectionist, but when it comes down to bowling, every little thing I do matters. But it's a game, and I should realize it's a game, but we'll get to that on this episode. But it could be hitting golf balls, just going out and going golfing. It could be any of these things. It could be learning a new craft. But take that time out with your spouse or even your kids. If you have kids, cherish every single day you have off with them. I can tell you from personal experience, I wish I did. Won't get into a lot of my personal life, not within this episode. There is people that do know me. One of my, you know what, I will, at least in a way. I've got one daughter who lives in New Jersey. She will be 21 this year. And in some ways, being a parent, when you go and get them because of a bad breakup or something of that nature, and you tell them, I love you, I would do anything for you, but at the end of the day, if you want to come back home, you need to find your own way. In a sense, I wasn't saying it to be mean, only because I knew the relationship, I knew how she was, and is. Now, mind you, she has moved back there. She did move back there about almost a year ago. And in some ways I regret saying it. However, I was at that age was at that age when I was 18, 19 years old. And Thanksgiving, when I was 19, and this was in a previous marriage. The day before Thanksgiving, went and got married. We went through the courts, Justice of the Peace. That's what I was thinking of. And so we went that route. We done it, and that weekend, my parents showed up, and my mother asked me what was on my hand, and I tried to hide it, and I shouldn't have. I got married, and I was already raising 2 kids of hers. And so, the point of the story is, I've went through that life, I've lived through it, and in some ways, like I said, I regret telling her, kind of, hey, you got to make your own way back home. I would give her money for it, but to travel to get her, I mean, I would, and especially in a life or death situation. I don't want to be the cold-hearted, and I hate to say, son of a bitch, but I have a heart, and with my daughter, or any of my kids, I would do anything on this earth to protect them, anything to help them. And in some ways, I wish that they knew that. And hopefully through this podcast, I will be able to help. And it also helps me emotionally to talk about these things. Now, I understand, like I said, it kind of went off track there, going through it, but it shows you all the little things. And I was so wrapped up as a younger person in my work that whenever I would go on vacations, in the job I was in, I could not go to another store of the same kind. Even to this day, I really can't. And the only reason I say that is I nitpick every little thing wrong. Luckily, I have a girlfriend who's very supportive of me when it comes to me mentally, because she knows that I will nitpick a store within 3 minutes time of what's wrong with it, if I even want to be there. And I have walked out places because of it. But going back to hitting the wall, like I said, by the time I was at that stage and my emotional being of hitting that wall, I can look back at it now and be like, hey, maybe you should have talked to somebody, or talked to somebody a little bit more. And like I told y'all in a previous podcast, in last podcast actually, that my father had passed away 3 years ago. And I talked to my mother, but I had the ability to really sit and talk to my father a little bit more. And it wasn't that it was more comfortable, but in some ways, I could talk to him a little bit better. I don't know if it's because it was father to son, or if it or just a male to male, or what it is. But I had a tendency to be able to talk with him more. And the first 6 months that he had passed away was probably the hardest thing I had to do. Because I understood my mother had her life, and she was going through so much. She's still going through so much. We both are. But I didn't want it to be a burden. And even today, there's things that I really haven't discussed with her because I don't want it to be a burden. And that's where I'm coming in to talk with you all now. I don't want you all ever to get in that position where I was at and feel that you are a burden to talk with somebody. Like I said, if you're ever in a position mentally, emotionally, that you need someone to sit and talk to, no, I'm not a licensed therapist. Not yet, not by any means. I'm still working on my degree. I'm still getting there. But from the aspect of being just an individual who's experienced life, I will sit and listen and give you the best advice. At least that I think. Now you can do what you want with it. Just like now. With me sitting here talking with you all on this podcast, the podcast title, Let Me Talk About It. It's not only that, it's also let you think about it. And I want you all to sit and take that deep dive. Whether you're just entering a career, getting ready to, switch careers, or maybe you're almost at the end of your career, or you are like I was. You've been down that road and you're emotionally spent, and you don't feel like you have anywhere else to go. You don't have you don't feel like there's anybody to talk to. I'm telling you what, I am here. I will give you all my email. I will put it in the description. And I will sit and talk with you all personally, one-on-one. Like I said, it's not a therapist. Like I said, I'm not there yet. And even when I am, it is going to be that time that it's going to take me a while to develop that one-on-one with people. Because guess what? As human beings, we don't trust people. That's the cold, hard fact of it. Which I wish I could rechange the podcast to the cold, hard facts, but the Dead Zone episode kind of copyrights that, so I'm not able to use that. But the let me talk about it, that's what it's intended for. But here's the thing, is I want you all to let me know how you all feel, what you would think I need to do, what subjects in mental health you want me to talk on, and if you want to be a guest on the show. I would love to have you all on here, love to be able to talk with you all one-on-one, and have other listeners say, hey, here's somebody that may have the same problems as me, because guess what? At the end of the day, we all have these problems. We all experience some kind of heartache, some kind of trauma in our life that we hit that wall. We have that burden, but we don't want to expend that burden on anybody. And the biggest fact is I talk very little to people, like I've described here, emotionally, and what my problems are. But the thing is, though, I will listen to pretty much anybody. It doesn't matter who it is. Anybody who's got that big of a problem that they think that the only way is by hitting that wall, they're emotionally drained. Or they go through some other avenue, which unfortunately sometimes is suicide. I don't want people to ever go that route. Ever in my lifetime. I have firsthand had friends of mine that I wish to God I could have talked to more to this day. Because years ago, they had done something so tragic because they thought they had nowhere else to go. And I don't want to leave you all on a sad note. Because guess what? Like I said in the podcast, in last week's podcast, you know, life is a hard place, but it can be a very joyous place. The biggest thing I'm going to tell you all, and I don't push religion on anybody, to each of them yourselves. If you know your religion, if you know what everything is within your religion, you know, and I will not go through that, not on this podcast. What I can tell you, and like I said before, talk to me. Like I said, if you want to be one-on-one with me, I'll have a link to my email. Shoot me a message, and what I can do is we can correspond through email. Or if you want to be a guest on the show, or you just want to talk to me one-on-one and you don't want to be a guest on the show, you just want to say, hey, can you talk to me? Like I said, I'm going to have my Facebook set up. By the time this posts on this week's episode, I should already have the Facebook done. I will have the TikTok done up. I will have an email set up that is specifically for my podcast. That way you all have an avenue to be able to come out and say, hey, help me. And as I conclude this week's episode, I shared so much, and most of this week's it was kind of down, and I really don't like that. But the fact of the matter of mental health is, guess what? It's very hard. It's very cold, and sometimes the bitter truth is just that. It's bitter, and it's hard to swallow. As I leave, a happy note that I can give you all is that growing up, and I talked about this in last week's episode, my dad taught me a lot of things, and the biggest one is that at the end of the day, You never go to bed angry. And if you are in a relationship, don't ever be angry with your spouse and go to bed. Because tomorrow's never promised. And be thankful that every morning that you're with them, that you can wake up, even if they're sitting on the edge of the bed, playing solitaire on their phone, having their coffee, and you can give them a kiss and say, good morning, I love you. Well, that is it for this week's episode of Let Me Talk About It. Let me know in the comments what you think I need to work on for next week's episode. And I will look through them and we will decide, or I will decide, you all will help me decide what I need to talk about. And in that time, if I have someone that's wanting to join me, I will by all means find a way and schedule the time frame. And it might not be next week's episode, but we will get you on the air, and I promise you we'll sit and we'll talk about it. Thank you all once again. My name is Sean Pennington, and I will have next week's episode out soon. Bye, everybody.